Something that's been on my list is getting in the vent lines. Now, the vent lines go from this hole here, which will link out to the fuel tank vent, up around all sorts of stuff, over here, through here, and then back down to this hole over here. The idea is, I think, sort of like a P-trap in a drain, or a reverse P-trap. I don't know, I'm not a plumbist, but it prevents fuel from siphoning out. Now, obviously everything up here is tight, so we've got to keep it clean, we've got to keep it bent around things like the rudder cable, these longerons, and some other components that will be installed. So I'm going to do the best I can. We'll give it a whirl. I don't think it's any secret that I think these blue pieces are really cool, and I get excited anytime I get to work with them. It's like my favorite Lego piece. The first little bit of this, I think, is going to be a little touch and go. Not only has it been a while since I've worked on this stuff, the first few bends are way too tight to even try to get a bender in there, and I'm probably going to have to shape it all by hand. It's backwards. The vent is the first aspect of the fuel system up here, and now I'm excited that I can tackle all of the fuel system at the same time now that I have my boost pump, my filter, and my switch. With these components sourced, I am free not only to do the fuel vent lines, but I can do the fuel pickups and the route through the firewall to the engine. Another touch of oil to this. It doesn't take much. All right, easy peasy.
So you wanna go to war with me? You're talking like you think you're royalty. You think that I'm afraid.
First section of pipe is rough, and it took a couple tries. But hey, at least I got some extra practice flaring. And I'm glad I'm started there, because it was a good section to really work out the kinks in my bending style. I'm gonna have to transfer measurements for the rest of this, which is scary. left myself enough. Huh? Most of these bends are done just utilizing a pretty standard bending tool, and then for tighter ones I have these cheapy bending pliers that seem to work pretty well. That mixed with a 37 or 39, I forget which degree flaring tool. Important part is it's not 45, is the correct angle flaring tool for these fittings, and a simple pipe cutter. And between all of that and some measuring tools, I've tried using some wire or solder to approximate bends, but I'm able to get all these bends made. The first one came out fantastic. I'm really happy with it. It took a couple tries, some false starts, but once I started moving, I sort of got some techniques down. I'm excited to start the second. This is something that is a lot of fun. It's pretty rewarding.
Feel it in my bones. I'm coming for the I'm coming for the throne.
I gotta say, overall, I am blown away at how straightforward this one has been. I'm incredibly happy. As long as I don't throw it at the end here, I think it's going to come out great. My little technique of marking the bends has proven successful, where I take a Sharpie, I mark the start, and then a lot of times just using an eyeball, I see where the inside of the bend needs to be. And if you can visualize that, it keeps you from having to use too many angles and measurements, and you just mark the inside of the bend, you align that with the inside of the bend tool, you make your bend, and it so far has worked out great. Another thing that has proven to be extraordinarily helpful is just take a scrap piece of tube, put a bend in it. I have one that's a full 180, and I had to kind of work the last maybe 45 degrees. And I have one that's a 90, but it helps you visualize where your bend needs to start. And so I can hold this up, and I know I've got to go down through this hole here. And in order to do that, I can hold this up until my bend needs to start, bam, right there. Starts, and we got our little blue line. It should be the inside of the bend. Check things. Giving myself plenty of room. So I cut the tube pretty much flush with the bottom skin, and I pushed it aside so that I could put in our vent fitting, the end fitting here. And then I marked exactly where I'd need to cut if there were no flare. Now, I know a flare is going to take up about 1/8 of an inch, so my actual cut will be about 1/8 of an inch long of that mark I made, which should have us fitting perfect by the time all is said and done. There was a lot of taking this thing in and out in order to get that fit that I wanted. But again, I'm really happy with it. It's not touching anywhere. I haven't had to like tweak bends to try and either allow myself more slack or take up slack. Okay, so there's our mark. If it were gonna be just touching the end, I wanna go 1/8 inch long. All right, let's test it out. That's a pretty good fit. Now that came out well. That was fun. I only swore like 3, 4, 5 dozen times. That's a record for me. That's the hardest part about editing these videos, is working around all the swear words. Well, I think it only makes sense to continue on with the fuel system. And so the next thing is going to be fuel supply rather than fuel vent. And I think the best place to start with that is right here with the fuel selector switch. From here, everything kind of goes down and either out to the tanks or up to the motor, and before the motor, of course, the fuel boost pump. So with all of those terminating here, I'm gonna get this piece mounted and see where all of those lines need to come from, and then we'll get them to where they need to go. As I mentioned before, I'm going with an upgraded fuel switch. This is something that you interact with constantly. It's sort of a centerpiece of a cabin. This Andair fuel valve has some increased safety and reliability. One, for example, is the locking off selection, making sure that you don't accidentally switch it to off mid-flight, requiring you to kind of pull this tab. From there, you can switch between a left and a right tank. This does not feature any locking positions. It also looks like it belongs on a 1920s John Deere tractor. So to recap, safety, reliability, and look and feel, 1920s farm equipment. The fuel selector switch will mount in this piece. This piece also has this tab hanging out front in case you had a manual trim cable. This is where the trim would go. I, however, have electronic trim, so I either need to cut this off, or I was thinking even seeing if I can bend it to a full 90 and have it terminate underneath all of that center console sheet work that I'll be working on. So I think I'm going to give bending it a try, and if that doesn't work, I'll just cut it off. I quite like it. It terminates much nicer than just having a tab here, and I think it works. I don't know. I may regret it. We'll see. I do, however, need to cut the rest of this tab off. It's a little too much, doesn't need to all be there, and it makes it hard to get it in and out. So I'm gonna slice this just below the bend. One thing you might have noticed is that I actually now flip this upside down in order to have this bent in the way it is. It's not a problem if you are using the Andair fuel valve, because we're gonna cut a big circle out of this. However, if you were gonna use the valve invented by Eli Whitney in 1812, the holes to mount that would now be backwards, and so not really an option if you were planning on doing that. I'm gonna go ahead and cut the tab off and see where the circle needs to go and how big that circle needs to be. Yikes. I skipped over some parts because I was scared of boring everyone to death, but I still want to talk about them real quick. Some cool parts about the Andair fuel valve. It has elbows that you can adjust which direction those incoming and outgoing pipes are at. And once you've solidified which direction you're going to have those, you actually screw them in with some Allen heads and then either Loctite those in or punch them so that they can't rotate. Another cool thing is that it comes pre-drilled for nut plates, and you can put whatever size nut plates you want, so you can use whatever attachment hardware you want. I've chosen some standard nut plates and some countersunk screws, and I just slightly countersunk the bezel so that everything lands really flush and nice looking. This is cool. That switch just feels awesome, and this is really cool to have it mocked up here. So now what I need to do is basically strip away everything except the mount so I can see where my tubes, my lines, are going to start with the switch and where they need to get to. These tubes, as you can see, are tight fit through some spaces here. I'm not going to be able to bend them and install them like I was the vents. They're very much going to have to be sort of bent and fit in place. I'm not very excited about that. Well, now I've got this little doodad hanging out on both sides. And in the plans, it has us go ahead and take this tube and go directly to the tank. Now, I've got enough to where that might be an option, but I've heard it might not be a good idea. I would like to put a fitting on this and see if I can't do a steel braided line. That will absorb any movement between the wing and the fuselage better than this rubber grommet here. And I think it'll make servicing even easier. So for now, I'll probably leave it like this until we start getting closer to getting the wings on, and then I'll see what I want to do. I didn't like how those came out looking a little less than symmetrical, so I went ahead and cut the flare off of one and trimmed it down and reflared, and they're looking much better now. The next part of this is really simple. I have this piece and it will hold the boost pump and the filter, and there's an existing piece that we don't need, and this will take its place. Out with the old, in with the new. So I have like 2 sets of instructions. The regular instructions, the addendum instructions, 2 sets of plans, an entire rainbow of Clecos. And I'm just trying to get this thing fit, a dry fit essentially, so that I can poke some additional holes, add some nut plates, and work on the structure, the housing, get that all set so it's ready to prime. And then I'll worry about the actual pump, the pump tubing, and making sure that the fuel selector switch has its final resting place and is secure, bolted into position. Well, that was silly. Idiot. I almost forgot my heat baffle. What else am I gonna forget? Baffles are in. Everything's in. It's all mocked up. It looks nice. Now I think I just got to mark a number of pilot holes to retain the positioning of everything. And then a lot of those will wind up being nut plates. And so I need to go read about that. Everything's in there, pre-drilled, fit, happy, hunky-dory. I even went ahead and threw in the firewall recess. It doesn't say to do anything with that, so I just went ahead and marked where there's a couple holes from the center cover to the firewall recess. I figured they wouldn't be bad to have, though I didn't pre-drill because I don't know that I want to drill them yet. Now it's just pre-drilling for nut plates, a ton of nut plates, and then in a few areas prepping for some rivets with some dimples. Yeah, that's it. And I think this stuff can be primed. I don't belong with your nobility. Who died and made you king of anything? You think that I'm insane? It's your mistake.